So on the reels, I touched it on my first video, but this is, I believe it's called the mini reel, and it's from Premier One Fence. They're actually in my home state of Iowa here. So I really like these reels just because obviously micro scale, I don't need a lot of wire. And this is turbo wire from Gallagher that I'm using. I really like this stuff. I know there's a lot of the poly braid or poly rope people out there that say that that's better, but for my Dexters, they really don't put a lot of pressure on the fence. They don't test it a whole lot. This turbo wire from Gallagher has been great. It's less expensive, and I can fit more on these mini reels. So like I said, about 400 feet is what I can get comfortably on each reel. And there's enough room for it, and it doesn't make it super heavy. But it's got that lock on there, so you can lock it down. This is going on 3 years, I believe, on these reels, and I've got a handful, and all of them are still in great shape. You know, the plastic isn't beat up, the sun hasn't torn it down at all. The cold weather hasn't made it brittle and break, so I'm a big fan. One of the reasons why is that slot right there on the handle. Where I'm at now, I've obviously got field fence behind this wooden fence, but what I do for my strips is I take that slot and you can slide it right in there. So now I've got a nice tight stretch. That slot on that reel will actually, it'll fit on this field fence. It'll fit on single strand, like high tensile electric, which is what I use for my back brake back there. So it'll fit on that, and it'll actually even fit on barbed wire. So on both the south and the north side, this fence line here, those slots will fit over barbed wire as well. The other reel that I played around with, and I bought 2 of these right out of the gate, just because I wasn't sure what I was going to need when I first started. This is also from Premier One. I think it's like the economy reel or something like that. It's just a really basic reel. It's not geared, so you do have to do a lot of cranks to really reel up the wire. Your brake on it is, just this little guy. So it can be kind of a pain when you're trying to play out all that wire. But when you take it up, every time you reel it, this clicks up and down on each one of these squares. And so it actually does have a really nice locking system. The thing's just pretty heavy. If you are only hooking up to wire fence, it would work great, especially if you want to have more than 400 feet. I'm really not sure what the max capacity would be of this, but as you can see, it's got a nice big hook, so you can fit over really any surface. And then again, I'm using those yellow plastic handles to clip on the other end. I still use these 2. I'll use them when I create lanes, just because I have maybe like 600 feet. So when I have to create a lane through the pasture, if I have to get an animal up to the barn, or I want to get them in a trail of some sort, it actually works out pretty well to have this. They're not as efficient and versatile as those mini reels. So up here I made just a permanent back fence. So this is just to keep the animals out of the sod over here. And like I said, I've got a handful of these reels. They're cheap enough that you can buy a good amount. I've got 3 of them that have over 400 feet of that turbo wire on it. And again, that's just to cover my largest stretch in both the front and the back pasture. And then I've got a handful that have anywhere from, 20, 40, 60, 80 feet on them, just kind of smaller reels. And I use them for times like this when I just need a temporary back fence or a brake fence in the middle to separate AM, PM moves. Originally, when I first started, I was basically just using those wooden posts. Every wooden post is 8 feet wide, so I would be doing 2 sections per each strip, so 16 feet wide. So I would just take some of these handles, and I would put a handle on each end, and I would cut a section of turbo wire that was going to be 16 feet, and then I would just use that as my brake fence to kind of divide up each pasture. But as my animal herd numbers have grown, and like I've said in my other videos, I'm playing around with different widths of grazing strips, trying to get away from those long, narrow strips. Those little 16-foot sections don't work anymore. So I really like these minis just because of the versatility. I think this current one I'm using right now has about 80 feet on it. So again, you know, if your brake fence width is 20 feet, you can reel it up, get 20 feet out of it. If the brake fence width becomes 60 feet like I'm doing now, I can reel it out, get 60 feet out of it. So let's talk about posts quick. My end posts, I always use these gray and black. I believe they're Sunstar is the brand, and I get mine at Tractor Supply. I've seen them for sale at Baumgar's or Tyson's. Obviously each state kind of has their own farm store, but they're pretty generic. I like them obviously for the end corner post, just because these yellow hooks from Premier One fit perfectly around them. And it's strong fiberglass, it's really rigid. They can bend over quite far out of the ground and not snap. The thing I don't like about them is it only has 4 attachment points for wire, and where those attachment points come in, it doesn't really work for me height wise. It could work, but running the Dexters, my wire is only usually about 2 feet off the ground. That's it. You can go higher and lower depending on dips and rises in your land or the height of your grass, but I really like to have that wire at about 2 feet. And I'm not sure what this third one is, but that's too high and that's too low. So otherwise, great posts. They step into everything, especially when the ground gets hard. They push in really easily. And then kind of using these, you've got 2 options. You've got kind of this half hitch deal, so you can slide the wire in without touching it, or you've got this more permanent lock system. Open that up, slide the wire in, and it's not going anywhere. But definitely the biggest thing that I like about these mini reels in combination with these black and gray Sunstar posts is the fact that I can basically have a corner post anywhere. So I jam that Sunstar in between the handle and the body of the reel there, and it holds it nice and tight. So I've given myself a corner post. If I wanted to, let's say I finished up grazing this chunk and I was gonna set up another chunk in this front pasture, I can essentially just hook that up, reel this out, make a connection somewhere else on another post, and now I've given myself, like I said, just another corner, hold that reel, stretch it out to a new area, and that works great as I'm working my way up the strip and I'm cross fencing for my chunks. If I don't have a wire fence on one side, that's what I'll do. I'll take those mini reels just loaded with a little bit of wire and snap them onto that Sunstar, and that creates my back fence. For my line posts, I just use these black fiberglass step-ins. I don't know the brand. These are super generic. I've seen them at every single farm store I've ever been in. They're really cheap, but they're also really cheaply constructed. I would like to kind of get into, maybe as these start to continue breaking and I need to purchase more, buying like the O'Brien step-ins, just because I know that those are a little bit more rigid and durable. But these are cheap enough. You can buy, I've bought a whole box before. I think there's like 50 in a box, and unfortunately they do break quite a bit. Just when they get sun faded, the fiberglass really starts to break down and they snap, especially in cold weather. Both these hookup points, usually this little lip over here will snap, or it'll snap halfway down, and then you just kind of have a slot that the wire can pop out of really easily. Or I've seen it before where I've accidentally left one in the pasture, and a cow will come up and they'll try and scratch themselves on it, and they'll just snap the thing right clean in half. They work for what they are, and like I said, that's just a line post. They've got a lot of options for how high you can get that wire off the ground. Like I said, I like to run mine for my Dexters at about 2 feet off the ground. But if I need to go a little bit higher because the grass is really tall and it's drawing the electricity, the wet grass touching the wire will draw the electricity out of the charger, or I need to go a little bit lower because I've got a dip in the ground, it just gives you a ton of flexibility. So I'm a big fan of that. One of the biggest things I don't like, other than the lack of durability, is this is the only option you have to get the wire in here. And they loosen up for sure as the post gets older, but when you first get them, probably for about that first year, they're super stiff. And so when it's cold, man, when I come out to set up a new paddock, and it's cold out, it kills your fingers. I've actually gotten to the point where I use a knife, especially when I'm taking up fence in the morning, to change it out. I'll just use a knife like this, and I'll wedge it in there and open it up, and then I can slide the wire out. Obviously the wire's not charged, but just because coming down and hitting, 20 plus posts every morning, trying to open each one of these up with your fingers can be a bit painful. The other reason why I'm not a big fan of this style clip for your wire is because, let's say this was charged right now and I just had to make a quick adjustment, I'd have to go shut the fence down, because there's no good way to get this wire out of here without touching it and getting zapped yourself when it's charged. If I'm feeling really lazy and I'm feeling really frisky, again, I'll take my knife and I'll try and get, I might lift up on this with my rubber boot so it gets off the bottom, and then I'll take my knife and try and slowly pry this open and finagle this out. But that's where these Sunstar type clips really come into play, because all you got to do is give yourself a quarter turn on this post. The wire's running through here. Give yourself a quarter turn, and now it's basically in that opening. So you can take the wire off, put wire on, whatever, while the fence is charged. As far as post spacing goes, you're just gonna have to kind of play with your own setup, see what you're comfortable with, what works for you. I think I tend to overdo it. I put up, I think, a couple, 2, 3, 4 posts more per strip than I probably really need to, but it just makes me feel more comfortable to have more posts. I work 24-hour shifts, so the last thing I want is to get a phone call from someone saying the cows are somewhere they're not supposed to be because I got lazy and didn't want to step in just a few extra posts to really hold that wire rigid. I guess the two other positives I can come up with for running more posts is, like, this time of year when the grass gets pretty long, I've come out in the mornings before and the wire has been popped out of those posts laying on the ground in a certain area. Actually, there's been times when these clips have just broken off completely, just snapped off, because something, I'm assuming a deer, running through the pasture at night, didn't see the wire because the grass was too tall and ran right through it. I feel like having more of these posts upright along the strip just kind of gives it more of a visual marker above the tall grass. The other thing too is, I'll look out here when the herd's in this chunk. I'll look out here and I'll see a bunch of, fly catching birds sitting on each one of these posts. Eastern phoebes, kingbirds, stuff like that, that'll do what's called hawking, and they'll sit on these posts. They'll, see a bug out there, a fly out there, they'll fly out, catch one, come back, sit on the post again, fly out, catch another one, come back. So that's kind of cool. So to charge all this, I've got a few of these S10 solar chargers from Gallagher, and power up to 7 miles of fence at so many joules. But they're super portable. They're easy to affix to different areas. So I just bought one, and they're relatively inexpensive for the quality solar charger they are and the amount of power they put out. So I bought one to stay in the front pasture and one to stay in the back pasture, just so I'm not hauling the thing all over. As far as grounding goes, obviously it's got a green ground and a red positive that will go to different areas. I just use these these T-posts, grounding rods, and they're all tied together. So there's one tied into number 2, and then another jumper wire going to number 3. They're spaced 3 feet apart. I think they're 6 foot long grounding rods, spaced 3 feet apart, all tied together. So I hung it up here, and then I'll take this reel and clip it into the charger, and then I'll run that reel all along down the fence there and tie it into my strips. Obviously there's no hot wire in this front pasture, and that's just because I felt like running a temporary electric wire was far easier just to set up and then use that to reach all the way down and power each individual strip than it would have been to run a permanent hot wire along this back fence line and keep it charged. It works for me. It also, I'm doing a video actually right now. I'm trying to put together a video on shade, and it actually works too, because I'll touch on it just for a second, but I'll get into more detail in this other video. I'll run that wire, maybe 10, 12 feet off of this wooden fence line, and that creates a lane. And in this pasture, during the middle of summer, for the majority of the day, the only shade is in this back area from this tree line here, especially when the sun keeps working its way towards the west. So by having this 12-foot lane that I set up, it allows the animals to come out of each strip and work their way up and down the lane to kind of find the shade throughout the day. So here's that power line set up. The reel is hooked in up there by the charger. It's hooked onto the field fence. That charger, the alligator clips on the charger, are then connected to the turbo wire, and the turbo wire is running all the way down, clipped into just one of those Sun Stars, and then I use the alligator clips then to tie it into the paddock strip fence that's heading up. Obviously it's not too far off of the wooden fence, but I don't need a shade lane right now. It's still early enough in the year. The cows don't go chasing shade during the day. I'm hoping they're only going to be back here up here for 3, 4, maybe 5 days before I have to, or before I put them back here in this back pasture. This stuff was, man, it was so close. Just a few square edges, and I suppose that might even been stuff that the deer have been nibbling off, but we're real close. My experiment thus far worked. Obviously I had good luck with the weather. I was a little nervous, I was getting to the end of this 2.5 acre pasture where the cows are now. I was getting to the end of the strips, and the stuff back here at the beginning didn't quite look like it was going to recover in time, but the last couple days it's really flown. So we're close, we're right there. It's good to see that I can give them these larger strips, just top the grass, top third of the plant, keep it growing, keep it vegetative, get to the end of this pasture, and then turn them right back around and start all over. So my plan is, again, move them up here, give them 2 chunks for the rest of today, and then 2 chunks tomorrow. Keep them in this front pasture as long as I need to get that back pasture back fully recovered. Kind of knock this stuff down a little bit, keep it vegetative, put some impact on it. But otherwise, this front pasture is going to be stockpiled, I guess you'd call it. I mean, I'm officially stockpiling it. As you can see, it's pretty mature, but kind of keep that front pasture stockpiled because they're calling for a drought again this year here in Iowa, go figure. So work a 3rd time through this back pasture, and then I'm assuming by that time the rains will have shut off, and then we'll have to move up to the front pasture. But so that's it, guys. If you have any questions on the fence, let me know. Leave a comment down below. I'm trying to get back to everyone. Yeah, you guys have had some good ideas. Keep the ideas coming. I'd love to help you guys out as much as I can. One more thing I wanted to touch on too, as you can see, Premier One wireless fence tester. I picked this up when I bought my first fencing supplies, and it has come in handy. It's just a push and hold to power it. As you can see, it's on the light for low kilovolts. But that will raise depending on the power of your battery, or excuse me, the power of your fence. It's come in handy to test the fence. When I know there's a low shock, you can kind of use that tester, run it up and down your fence line, figure out where you've got an area that's drawing a bunch of power down. So it was cheap. I know there's more in-depth ones out there that can get pretty crazy with all the stuff they can tell you, but to me, that's just something simple to have, help you diagnose your fence issues.